Okay, we're going to call to order the meeting of the planning board for November 1st, 2023. Sorry, we were a little late, but we were in an executive session before this. It went longer than we planned. With alphabetical roll call, who's here?
Clark Brewer here.
Tom Callahan here.
Amy Glassmeyer here.
Kevin Hine here.
And we also have Cassandra Thayer, our town planner, and town council Carolyn Murray, and Mark Taccio. And then we also have Jim Reardon here with us from Weston and Sampson. The only item on our agenda tonight is a continuation of the public hearing for the subdivision at 94 Black Horse Lane. To the applicant, you should know that right now, with the 4 of us that are here, only 3 of us can vote because Clark has missed 2 meetings. Our other member, Deirdre, is not here tonight. She will be able to make up that meeting and vote. So we can either postpone to allow for 4 people to vote, or we could possibly go ahead today with 3. Anyway, for tonight, I'm going to start with Jim, just to give us an update that he had sent around to us all. And then we will hear from the applicant with anything they have to say, and then we'll hear from members of the public and finally members of the board.
Tom, could I just interrupt? I'm sorry, before we actually get into the substance of a hearing, could we actually hear from the applicant as to whether or not they do wish to go forward, even though there are only 3 voting members? Because if it is to be continued, we shouldn't take in any information this evening.
Okay, yeah. Attorney Brodsky, you're out there.
Sure, Callahan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Adam Brodsky, and as you know, I represent the applicant, Katie Custom Homes, LLC. We should also have Nino Danino in the audience, as well as Carmen Hudson from Merrill Engineering. We'd like to go forward with your permission to see whether or not there's a consensus to approve this subdivision plan. But if it appears that is not the case, we would like to continue the public hearing. I would hope that Ms. Hobson, if necessary, could review the videotape regarding any additional information and provide the necessary certification so that she could participate in another public hearing if necessary. But since we've been doing this for so long, we'd like to get some sense of whether we are on the right track, if that's appropriate.
Okay. All right, well then I guess we will go on and proceed. Jim, you have the floor.
Thank you, Tom. I'm Jim Reardon from Weston and Sampson, here to present on the peer review this evening. Very much appreciate you folks all having me here. I'll share my screen and go through a brief PowerPoint if that's okay. So is that visible for folks?
Yep. Yep.
Great. Okay. So obviously November 1st, and this is the peer review for the subdivision plan supplemental peer review for 94 Black Horse Lane. Primary focus, of course, is the subdivision review, and here's a brief overview of what we understand to be the background. It's 8.7 acres with 9 existing lots. It's in a FEMA Zone X. It's in the Residential Zoning District B, Floodplain and Watershed Protection District as well. There is an existing 12-foot road with a 20-foot right-of-way. And some of those things are depicted in the graphics to the left on this screen. This is taken from Merrill Land Surveyors, and it depicts the proposed project. As you can see, there's an extension of an existing private way. The applicant intends to widen the private way to 18 feet. And there will be creation of 4 lots from the 9 existing. So they're going to collapse some of the lots and create 4 total. Our review standards included the Cohasset bylaws, Cohasset subdivision regulations, general constructability comments, so essentially good practice. And we did an initial peer review, presented that to the Cohasset Planning Board back in September. I won't go through all these items, but they, as they are listed in the peer review letters that were sent your way. But they do include materials that we have received between August and the end of October, October 26th. We did an initial peer review, as I mentioned, back in August, and that was delivered August 30th. And we've done 3 supplemental peer reviews since then. So there was one done on October 6th, and then 2 others. So the 2 others you have in front of you or have received recently, October 25th, and then we received some more information from the applicant on the 26th of October, and we're able to fit in a, an expedited, I would say, peer review of those items, and that was delivered on the 27th of October. So the materials that we're talking about this evening primarily are the ones at the bottom of the screen that are in the blue font, so that they stand out a little bit from the ones that we reviewed previously. So I wanted to go over, give you folks all a brief summary of our findings from the peer review. So in our initial peer review, we identified several items that we recommended receiving additional information on or revisions. And so we're going to go over those. This is, again, a summary. So we've cut out some of the less significant ones and just focused on the major ones. So one of them had to do with the stormwater infiltration system, which I believe was originally proposed as a Coltech and is now StormTech or storm treat system. Our comment had been that or one of our comments, our primary comment, had been that there was no pre-treatment isolator row included in that subsurface system. That's generally recommended, and so we recommended it here. The applicant's engineer and the applicant have included a new design that includes that isolator row, which will help out for O&M. So that recommendation is taken care of and is listed as done here. Providing stormwater treatment or a request of waiver for the existing paved areas. So one of the Massachusetts standards is when you're redeveloping that you have to provide at least half treatment for existing impervious surface. The applicant has done that now, so they didn't need to request a waiver. So we found that to be substantially complete. Approximately half the area was treated. And so we would say that that one is taken care of. So that's also listed as done. Providing a catch basin and pipe along the reconstructed roadway section to avoid ponding and washout issues. We asked for revisions to the plan, we received revisions to the plan, which indicated some increased flow over the initial comment that we had made, the initial plan that we had looked at, and we had requested revised calculations. That information was provided to us, and so that's taken care of as well. Fourth comment here is providing calculations showing adequate capacity for a 10-inch pipe that drains in this area. That had been a question because the general standard would be for a 12-inch pipe. The applicant's engineer revised the design plans to include a 12-inch pipe, so that one has been taken care of as well, also listed as done. Comment on the original review had been that unless the proposed 6-inch water pipe is approved by the Cohasset water department, then the applicant should provide an 8-inch pipe. That 8-inch pipe is standard, and originally a 6-inch pipe had been proposed. However, the applicant's engineer redesigned that, provided us with those designs. That's now an 8-inch pipe, so that's taken care of. This next recommendation, we recommended including a condition that the planning board approved this with a condition. This is confirming that the sewer pipe size is okay with the Cohasset sewer department. So the applicant has proposed a sewer pipe that is a little bit different than the standard, and we wanted to make sure that the sewer department is okay with that. So again, we'd recommend that as a condition. Provide traffic loading specifications for the Schedule 20 storm drain pipe. So initially there had been a storm drain pipe that was a different schedule, lower level of schedule. And since then, the applicant has provided the information we requested, Schedule 20 pipe. And so that item is also done. That's taken care of. This is another item. This fourth item on the slide is another item for board consideration. We recommend that the planning board consider if the proposed 30-foot width and sidewalk on one side is in keeping with the area. The current proposal is for 30 feet instead of 50 feet, 40 feet wide, and sidewalks on one side of the street instead of on both. We don't have a technical issue with that, but again, we would recommend that the board consider this and decide whether this is acceptable or not. And then the final item here, again, this is recommended for a condition, is that there is no street parking recommended as a condition of approval. So the way it is set up currently, street parking, I believe, would be temporarily restricted. And we would recommend that as a condition of approval, that it should be permanent. And that concludes the main comments that we have for the peer review. Happy to take any questions or comments at this point. And I'll certainly remain on for items that might come up as part of discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody on the board have a question for Jim? And Kevin, go ahead.
Jim, on the board, it said Cape Cod berm. Can you briefly describe what a Cape Cod berm is?
Sure. So sometimes you'll notice on a roadway, I guess the traditional thing on a roadway is that separating a sidewalk from the road, that there is curbing, like granite curbing or something like that. Sometimes on a roadway, you may notice that there's sort of an asphalt hump to both sides of the roadway. That's intended to direct stormwater so that it, it stays within the road. It also helps, keep the cars aware of where the edge of the road is. Those humps are called Cape Cod berms. I guess they were maybe first used in Cape Cod, which is where the terminology comes from.
So it's something less than traditional curbing with angular edges. It's a more sloped surface of a smaller scale than a regular granite curb, say.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, I have seen those and I'm familiar with them. Thank you.
Anyone else? I know that there are some, Cassandra and Carolyn have put together some draft conditions. Have we captured everything that Jim was recommending for a condition?
I'd like to speak. I'm
Can
unclear.
I just get an answer that we're capturing these things and then I'll let you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I know that Jim's report did raise no parking, and I don't believe I added that in the conditions, but I will certainly make sure the final draft does.
Amy, go ahead.
I wasn't clear on Jim's discussion of the road width and also the application of sidewalks. So can I get a little bit more detail as to what you're referring to?
So sure, absolutely. So normally, or I shouldn't say normally, by standard, you folks require a 40-foot width right of way with sidewalks on both sides. In this particular case, they're providing 30 feet sidewalk on one side. The existing condition out there is a narrower street. I believe it's 18, and it doesn't have sidewalks. So, we look at what they're proposing as a compromise, and we don't have an issue with that from any technical standpoint. But it is somewhat different than what the standard is. And so we put it in front of you for consideration.
Okay, so I guess then I'm not sure who I asked this question of, but what's the rationale for deviating from practice?
That's not for Jim to answer. That's
No,
for
I'll
the,
leave that to
that's for the applicant to answer.
Applicant to answer.
All right, anybody else on the board have a specific question for Jim? All right, then Adam,
Thank you very much.
okay,
those-
thank you, Jim.
So I do
Adam,
want to point out
go ahead.
that we're not seeking a waiver for one sidewalk. We're not proposing any sidewalks because there presently are no sidewalks on the public portion of Black Horse Lane. And we did provide extensive documentation as to the rationale, both for the waiver with respect to sidewalks, as well as the reduction in the width of the right-of-way. Again, we proposed a smaller right-of-way to minimize the alterations and the removal of trees in this area. The existing private portion of Black Horse Lane is only 12 feet wide, and I believe has a 20-foot right-of-way. We're proposing to increase that to 30 feet and have 18 feet of pavement. But anything more than that would require additional alterations of the natural landscape. And we suggest that the subdivision standards, which were drafted decades ago for large subdivisions, are really not applicable to what is only a 4-lot subdivision.
Well, it's not a 4-lot subdivision when there's 4 other lots that are going to use it, so.
So
we
I-
have
I-
to- you might want to ignore that, and I understand why you ignore that, but we can't ignore that.
Yeah, and I'm not
my
actually-
concern is the 18-foot width. If you have 30-foot right away, I'm trying to understand why 20 can't be the pavement. I believe it's 20 in your cul-de-sac. I personally think it should be 20 the whole.
I wasn't actually finished with my comment.
All right, go ahead.
Brodsky's response. I'm not, help me understand the rationale for what you just said. You're basically suggesting that what we would be doing if we were to use the standards that we have typically used in the past, and I must say I can't think of a big subdivision. I can think of a small subdivision. That's the standard that we have in town. What is the rationale for us to somehow abrogate the use of the existing requirements that we have as a subdivision standard?
No, thank you. Again, there's been discussion regarding the environmental sensitivity of this area and the natural landscape. To build a wider road with a larger right-of-way is simply going to result in more alteration for no additional safety benefit. You may remember that we provided you with a traffic impact analysis to justify the existence and the proposal of an 18-foot paved road, which is more than sufficient for the minimum number of vehicles that are going to be using this. And so, again, we provided a great deal of information on this. I do see that Ms. Hudson has her hand up. And again, I'm more than happy to defer to her expertise, but I'm just reviewing the
Well,
material.
why don't you pull up the plan and show us while you're answering this, exactly what you're saying would be altered if we had a wider road? I think it's hard for us just to talk about it. I think it would help if we could visualize it.
We also included in our response.
Could you bring the site plan up, please?
Yeah, but I am okay. So here's the site plan of what we are proposing. However, we included in our
Carmen, we
response.
cannot see it yet. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. What I wanted to mention with respect to Mrs. Glassmeyer's comment was that we also there was a subdivision that was approved in 2008, and that was Quannahasset Trail off of North Main Street, and that created 7 new lots for 7 new homes. As you know, North Main Street, unlike Black Horse Lane, is not a deficient road like Black Horse Lane is, especially at the end of it, as it is here at the public way. And also, North Main Street has 1 sidewalk, not 2. But the subdivision, the 7-lot subdivision on Quannahasset Trail, Trail was approved the subdivision with an 18-foot paved roadway like we're proposing, and only 1 sidewalk because that matched the existing sidewalk on North Main Street. And right now, since that has been built since 2008, the sidewalk from Quannahasset Trail and the sidewalk from North Main Street are connected via a crossing, a crosswalk. So there is precedent as far as the width of the road approved, that the waivers approved to match existing conditions. In our case, we are proposing 3 new dwellings and, keeping the existing dwelling. And we're coming from a very deficient road that doesn't have any sidewalk. So that is part of our rationale for this waiver request.
The rationale I'm focusing on is you're saying it's going to alter some natural features, trees, etc. Where is that happening?
So as far as that is concerned,
Forget about the sidewalk and forget about Quannahasset Lane. It's not a precedent. But
I'm sorry, but I was just trying to answer Mrs. Glassmeyer's comment. So as far as
her comment at its core is, why is this road not being made as wide as it could be? And the answer is, well, it's going to alter some natural features of the property. Will show us where those are.
And I should note, Chair Callahan, we're also creating additional impervious area where we don't need it. This board has been very clear that they want to minimize impervious. So as we demonstrated in our traffic impact study, there's no need for additional impervious area here. The 18-foot width is sufficient. But Carmen, I mean, it would be, unless I'm mistaken, along the entire length of the existing private way, which would have to be widened, correct?
So the proposed road extension starts here. We're making this 18 feet wide. This is an existing road. And we are proposing to better the existing road by making it match the proposed road. And yes, it would be 18 feet and it would have Cape Cod berms on both sides.
So the additional area that would need to be altered is along the entire length of the proposed road, correct?
Yeah, so it would be from here on, then everything would have to be wider. And I mean, so the question is if no waivers could be granted based on this coming off of an efficient public way that doesn't have any sidewalks, where the pavement goes from 9 to 12 feet in width. If no waivers could be granted, then yes, from here on, we would have to propose a 24-foot wide pavement plus 2-foot curbs plus 2 sidewalks plus 2 strips.
Okay, so I'm not quite done yet with this
Yeah,
questioning.
go ahead. And the question isn't being answered, but that's.
So my view, recognizing that Mr. Brodsky is both a environmental and a land use lawyer, I know that he knows that trade-offs always exist, and you have to decide what your value system is in order to rationalize what your decision is. In this particular case, given the situation and given the long-term prospect of how this area is going to evolve, it is possible that the planning board could want to have the most substantial road structure and sidewalks possible, because we are concerned that A, it's part of the bylaw as stands for subdivisions, and B, because we know that there's likely to be families with children, there's likely to be more development. So from my perspective, you're making a decision for us, but I'm suggesting that we may have other concerns that override the suggestions you're making.
So, Ms. Glassmeyer, this is Adam Brodsky. It's of course the decision of the planning board. All I can tell you is that we've tried to minimize impervious, minimize removal of trees, minimize the impact to the environment, and provide a safe access way for this project as attested to by our traffic engineer. There is going to be no more development at the end of the private portion of Black Horse Lane because we are using all of the land that KD Custom Homes owns. The total of 9 lots are going to be reduced down to 1 existing and 3 additional lots. And we've agreed as a special condition not to be able to connect the end of this subdivision road to Cedar Lane. Not that it could be done in the real world anyway, because that's all wetlands. So this is the total extent of development on the property that's controlled by Mr. DeNuno. Again, this has been presented as a compromise to resolve this litigation. If the planning board wanted to see a 1970s style subdivision road through here, we would have never gone through this process. This has to be a compromise all around, but there's no, I respectfully suggest, no reason to build a 1970s subdivision style road in order to accommodate 3 new single family houses.
And don't suggest that that's what we're talking about.
Well, that's if you apply the standards of your
No,
subdivision
we're-
regulations without waivers, you're going to get an antiquated, over-designed, environmentally unfriendly project.
You're not showing me where an extra 2 feet of pavement is going to adversely impact the environment. If it's
So-
just the nature of the fact that it's impervious material, that's one thing, but you're talking about trees. I don't see any trees on this plan. I don't know what you're talking about.
So
I'm not suggesting, personally, I'm just speaking just for myself. I'm not suggesting you do 40 and 24. I am suggesting 20 on pavement. That's what I'm suggesting. and
I
that's-
think Ms. Hudson has brought the existing conditions plan up and she can show you all of the trees.
all right. That was the question at the beginning, so.
Also, I just wanted to mention that the Cape Cod berms, originally, we were proposing along the new road. That would be the extension of the existing private way here. We were proposing, just regular Bitcombe curb, so that those go up vertically 6 inches. Now we're proposing Cape Cod berms, so they are 1 foot in width, and they only go up in the back by 3 inches. And the reason why we did that is that, so if there is any need to go over the curb, a car could easily go over the Cape Cod berm. So if there is a need for an emergency vehicle or simply a truck that was going by, a car can easily go over the curb and just park on the lawn. But so it's 18 feet of pavement and 2 feet, that is 1 foot on either side of mountable shallow curbing.
Now, wasn't there
I just, I can't get a straight answer to a simple question. You're using impacts on the environment as a justification, and I still haven't seen what the impacts are.
Carmen, could you please bring up
Hear
the
about the
existing
Cape Cod berm.
conditions,
This
conditions
is-
plan, please?
So these are all of the trees that we have all along. We're proposing the road, and these are only the trees that are 12 inches and over. Any trees that are below that are not required to be surveyed. And what we were trying to do, and also if you can see, this is all going up in elevation. So, and this consists of ledge. So we are trying to remove by reducing the footprint of the road as few trees as possible. And once again, this only shows trees 12 inches and over, and try to blast as little ledge as possible. There is a salt marsh here on this side. These are isolated vegetated wetlands. There is a border and vegetated wetland here. So we are surrounded by wetlands, but we managed to put the road and all of the work outside of not only the wetlands and the floodplain, but the buffer zones on this side as well. So that is the trying to minimize the environmental impact.
Can I ask another question around
Yeah,
about the area that's treed? Do you have an inventory of the type of tree that you're discussing as something that we might wish to preserve? We have a series of invasive trees that are very common in that setting. And I'm just wondering if these are specimen trees, or are they basically maple trees, which are considered primarily as invasives and not specimen trees?
So the trees, normally what we do is we survey all of the trees. We might have a brief description if our surveyor can tell what kind of trees they are. I only have the sizes here. I know for sure that we are not going to have a description of what kind of tree each one of these trees are. We normally have a closer inventory whenever we're proposing anything within the buffer zone for the Conservation Commission, as they normally require us to plant a tree for every tree that is taken down, even within their it's normally within their 50-foot buffer zone, but we those trees actually, we have to pick up anything within the buffer zone that is 6 inches and over. So no, I don't know exactly the specimens. I might be able to get a few specimens, but I know I will not have the type of tree for all of the trees that we located. The requirement.
Yeah, and some of the area that you're using with your pointing with your arrow is really not what I'm concerned about. I'm really concerned about the area that is along the road.
Here.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because I think that the upland trees are gonna be different simply because of what kind of trees would actually grow there. But when we're making a justification for making a size of a road and whether or not we're gonna have a sidewalk, for me, the reference to the 1970s, I'm not familiar with. I have driven around our suburbs, and I can't say that it looks like the suburbs that I'm familiar with. But when it comes to trees along the roadway and the prospect of having a sidewalk and a wider road, that's really what I'm trying to figure out.
So as far as
What's the best thing to do for access in and out of this particular area?
So I am sorry, I guess I'm not understanding the question. As far as the trees are concerned, all of this area is going to be disturbed now because of the infiltration system. So the excavation will go beyond this. And then we have this as well, which is the outlet pipe from the infiltration system and a turnaround that was requested. What were you referring to the
So then you're
existing
saying
private
that
way?
the infiltration chamber is going to disturb the upland area where right now it is vegetated, and it will be
Yes.
unvegetated once it is dealt with. So then we
Yes.
really not, are you saying that we're really not preserving trees?
We're not preserving trees wherever we have either infiltration systems or grading. So in this case, this is the test pit that we use for the infiltration system. So all of these trees will have to be removed so that the infiltration system can be installed. Maybe a couple of trees here might be removed as well if we need it for the overflow pipe. It might not. But all of these trees that currently are within the footprint of the infiltration system will definitely be removed.
Okay, so then I can conclude, then I'm having a hard time. Show me where we're going to be saving trees along the road.
Along the road up. So at the very beginning of the road, these trees would remain. Anything
the
that is
upland.
upland from grading.
Okay.
So all of any trees in this location, and once again, if you see this, this is the buffer zone. There are many trees beyond the buffer zone. However, we're not showing that since we are not doing any work within the buffer zone, but we did locate them. So any trees beyond the buffer zone are being saved. Let me see. Once again, anything that is beyond, like all of the trees over here, all of the trees, anything beyond the grading will not be touched.
I see.
know?
Okay, so then let's go back
Here at
to
the beginning.
road.
Mhm.
You want to
The
say?
road.
Did you, so let's go back to the road. So if we wanted to have a regular 1970s subdivision road with a sidewalk along the road that we are talking about, and where the infiltration chamber is going to be located, and it's going to disturb the ground, is there an environmental impact that we are missing or we're going to lose? Because it sounds like you're actually going to have to tear up that area anyway. So then if we wanted the road to be bigger and have a sidewalk, would we be actually making things worse?
So this portion of the private way, though, this is not part of the subdivision. The subdivision starts here at the new road. That is this is the extension that we're proposing. What the 6 feet of additional pavement. The
You're
6 feet of
incorrect.
additional pavement was over
Ms.
here.
Hudson, Ms. Hudson, we are considering the entire length of this private way from where it ends at the public portion as part of this project. You're proposing widening it, you're proposing widening it less than we require. We've asked asked questions and we're not getting answers.
Chair
You said the
Callahan,
no, Adam, please, you're saying there's a justification of environmental impact. In the area along the side of this road, there is going to be an environmental impact because you're putting in an infiltration system. Got nothing to do with the roadway. And
so
a simple question, why can't the roadway be wider? What
So-
are we losing if it's wider?
you're going to lose more trees, you're gonna have more ledge removal and more alteration than you would without it, with no justification for public safety, Chair Callahan. We have provided you with a traffic engineer's report that
Based
says
on
that
4
18
houses when 8 are going to use this place.
The traffic impact study took into consideration the 8 houses, if you will recall. There's been
Okay.
no testimony from any experts here to suggest that the 18-foot width is not sufficient. It's an arbitrary number that the planning board has latched onto without rational basis for. If there was a need for a larger road, we would provide it for public safety reasons. We've demonstrated to the planning board that there is no need. Again, I spend much of my time in front of this board, and I'm always told, minimize alteration, minimize ledge removal, minimize tree removal. And you're proposing in this instance to do the opposite for no additional public safety benefit.
We're asking questions because of a justification given. That's and the answer, the justifications being provided tonight just doesn't match up. We will, obviously consider that in our decision. All right, I see Mr. DeNuno's hand up. Go ahead, sir. Mr. DeNuno.
Nino, you're still muted. It looks like he's having a technical problem.
All right, all right. All right, well, we've
So
gone out.
just to clarify for the record, the widening of the private portion of the existing way is it's going to result in the additional removal of trees, as Ms. Hudson said, closer to the public portion of it and to the south of the proposed infiltration basin. And I'd respectfully suggest that the widening of the subdivision cul-de-sac will also result in the removal of additional trees, as well as additional ledge removal, which again has never been my understanding what this board has been all about.
I just wanted to mention that extending or adding any more additional impervious materials is going to require a bigger infiltration system. I know that in this direction, this was extremely difficult. And the reason why it's so large is because it's extremely shallow. And we're just getting the minimum 2-foot separation to groundwater. So this is a very difficult area to put an infiltration system in. As you can see, is close to the road, and that is because of all the ledge here. All of this is ledge, so we're trying to stay away from the ledge, and these are shallow to bedrock soil. So in reality, up until we don't know if there's going to be, any ledge in any other area that we didn't encounter. So once again, any more pavement or impervious sidewalk, any impervious materials would require more infiltration. So it's not simply why can't the footprint of this be 2 feet wider? It's going to impact everything else that we need in order to handle that extra 2 feet and let's say 1 sidewalk or 2 sidewalks or anything impervious.
All right, we kind of totally have gone out of the order that I wanted to set. So let's turn to the public right now and see if there's any comments. I see we have in the Q&A anonymous attendee. If no parking is allowed on the subdivision road, will that just cause people attending a large gathering to park on Black Horse Lane, which is even narrower in places than the subdivision road? So that, I'm assuming the public portion of Black Horse Lane. Anybody want to comment on that?
Chair Callahan, we have no issue with prohibiting parking along the private portion of Black Horse Lane. I suggest that it's infeasible to park on the public portion of Black Horse Lane, and that no one would really do that and walk some distance. There's plenty of space on these properties for parking.
Okay. All right, going back to the site plan, anybody else from the public wish to be heard? Anybody's hands up? All right, going back to the site plan a minute, talked about the condition of never connecting to Cedar Lane, but just another concern hit me while I was looking at this. At number 39 Black Horse Lane, it has a driveway that goes out to the existing public portion of the road, but it's right up close to your roadway. And just looking ahead in the future, would you have a problem with a condition that said there would never be allowed a connection of that property to your road? I could see someone, being deeded enough frontage on your road and then formatting 39 Black Horse, and now we all of a sudden have another dwelling being served by this road. I appreciate you agreeing that you would never connect to Cedar Lane, and that might be never unrealistic to begin with, but it's more realistic to me that 39 Black Horse could be easily given a connection to the road, and then who knows what would happen, how many houses could be developed in the future on 39. I'm just throwing that out because it just occurred to me as I'm looking at the site plan.
So I'm trying to understand this.
Go to the
One of the lots is going to own the land between 39 and the subdivision road.
Correct, yeah, go to
So
the,
how, I don't see how that could happen, because that lot would then be reduced. I mean, you're asking
well,
us
all right,
to,
well, here,
you're asking us
go-
to encumber property that's going to be conveyed to other people, because I don't even see how this is even feasible.
Well, it's feasible because your new lots are gonna have enough size that they could convey a small strip of land to this owner at 39, and then all of a sudden 39 has frontage on this new roadway. You need to go to the proposal, the proposed plan, not the existing conditions plan.
Okay, so I just wanted,
I mean, appreciate the fact that there's this small useless strip of land to the whatever lot will own it. And then, all of a sudden 39 has frontage on this portion of Black Horse Lane.
the elevation,
39 is large enough that somebody could try to Form A it in the future, and then there we are with more lots being served. I'm throwing that out there on the same principle as not to connect to Cedar Lane, is to not encourage more development in this area than already would be permitted.
this lot, however, is about 40 feet higher than the elevation of this road.
I'm talking about over here towards the end of your cul-de-sac. I have no idea what the elevations are at that point. There.
They go from 40 to 64.
Okay. Not impossible. It would be very feasible or conceivable that the owners of these new lots have these useless strips on the other side of the roadway, and the owner of 39 would become interested in that, to have another point of access, possibly to develop a future lot. That's all again, it just occurred to me sitting here for the last few minutes. And would you, how would you react to a condition that wouldn't let that happen?
I've never seen a condition in a subdivision approval that restricts future development of an abutting lot.
I understand that. Adam.
I think that's-
I'm thinking outside the box. I tend to do
I'm just
that.
trying to understand it, Chair Callahan. I think it's overreaching by the planning board in connection with a subdivision road. I understand the planning board does not want to allow development in the town, but to
No, that's not a fair statement. I'm just thinking outside the box here because of the close proximity and these essentially a useless strip of land being created between 39 and the roadway. That's all I'm saying.
The planning board's mission is to determine whether what we're proposing either meets your subdivision standards or is entitled to waivers under your subdivision standards without regard to property restrictions. The client has already agreed not to connect to Cedar Lane, principally because it's not feasible because of the existence of wetlands. But to further place restrictions on property that affect others, I think is just, again, it's a business decision for Mr. DeNuno, but I would not recommend it.
I have my answer, so. Anybody else on the board have anything to say?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up, Tom, on the impact of the road width on, if I remember correctly, the like American Highway traffic engineers indicates that the load, the traffic counts for a house is one traffic peak hour trip. So if you have four houses in a subdivision, you'd expect one peak hour trip. I presumably that's what the traffic study says. So not a lot of traffic.
Yeah, no,
I mean, if it was Fair Oaks with 45 houses or so, that's sort of a different animal.
Carolyn, can we not share the screen just so I can see everybody, please? Kevin, go ahead in the meantime. Kevin, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Attorney Brodsky, could you clarify which parcel would own that thin strip? You were just in I think a tangential discussion with Chair Callahan about, is that a thin strip that's owned by one of the 4 lots, or is it owned by a separate parcel or a separate lot that isn't developed? Can you just clarify what we're talking about? And I guess that goes for that whole strip along that, I guess would be the southwest side of that private way we're talking about.
Yes, sir. I believe that all belongs to lot number 4.
Okay, but lot number 4 in itself has the necessary dimensions, buildable area. In itself, that strip just happens to be attached, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that strip we're talking about, that thin narrow strip that goes from the round cul-de-sac and up winds its way around the bend and then goes all the way up to the public portion of Black Horse Lane, that's not necessarily needs to be attached to the lot it's attached to. Is that right?
I'll have to defer to Ms. Hudson on that question. I believe our intention was to limit the number of lots that could be developed. So the rest of that land was included within lot number 4.
Yes, and I'm sorry, could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, see where you have your pointer right now, that area, that, and you can go all the way further down past beyond that, and that little strip there. But
yes,
yeah, exactly. You're following it up, going up around there. That portion of the lot and the acreage in it is not in itself required to be attached to the lot you have it attached to, which I believe is the lot referred to as number 4 over on the.
Yes.
Okay. So conceptually, could that portion be considered not a 5th lot for development purposes, but a 5th lot, say, for other perhaps uses, by just saving trees along it, minimizing impacts to ledge, protecting existing ledge, perhaps just preserving that portion of this area we're talking about, if that were to be carved out as a separate lot, not for development purposes, but just to remain as a preserved area of no further disruption, no further building. That along those lines, I'm conceptually putting that out there. Just wonder if that was any considerations that the applicant had, or if there's anything the board should know with regard to that.
Mr. Heine, that is our intention, that's not going to be developed into another single family, and we're putting our stormwater structures. Again, there's some significant elevation.
Yeah.
The only usable land is now going to be used for the additional stormwater BMPs that we were asked to provide for the existing portion of the road. So there's no plan for development of that.
So I along those lines then, conceptually, is it possible that to ensure that that remains that way in posterity, could there be a line that separates that, a property line that actually separates that parcel out from the property you have it connected to, the developable property that winds its way over by that end of the cul-de-sac, and then this area we're talking about here becomes its own lot that perhaps gets transferred, perhaps by the applicant, into some other third party, some trust or something like that, that would have the intended purpose of just preserving it as is, and it would never be developed?
So the problem is that we're also going to be responsible for maintenance of those stormwater structures. So
Sure.
I don't see how you could accomplish both of those tasks, because again, it's going to be the responsibility of the lot owners to maintain those areas. If we transfer it to a third party, it's pretty complicated.
I've seen and heard a lot more complications than something like that, whereby a separate party may be maintaining some engineering structure that is for the benefit of their other lots on perhaps a portion that is being preserved and remains preserved in perpetuity, but still has some engineering features on it that are used for other areas. So I think you understand the concept, but I'm just trying to put it out on the table here for others to maybe consider that. Hadn't thought of that. It sounds like you and your client may have, but I wouldn't think that any engineering, like by this infiltration gallery in itself, and I see that's prominently located where it is for the design purposes it's intended for, would be an impediment to doing what perhaps could be conceived here, especially if along that area you're talking about preserving by having a narrow width road has ledge, and it has perhaps some unique species in it, or some unique flora, or perhaps even fauna. I just putting it out there. If there's ledge, that's unique in itself. And you're right, this board has been on the record on a number of different projects as being of interest in preserving that. So I just put that forth as kind of a comment, and I guess I put it forth as questions as well, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and Mr. Heine, we're now aware this is not mapped as endangered or priority habitat for anything. It's a beautiful area, and we share the board's desire to preserve the natural environment there, but there's no special species that requires protection.
Okay.
Okay. Carolyn, so as I mentioned too earlier, there was some draft conditions that have been put together. I know they were sent to Mr. Brodsky today. Is there any particular thing in the draft, Adam, that you object to or have some questions about?
So I did provide town council with simply some suggestions regarding conditions. And again, I'll speak to that in a moment. I just want to make it clear that given the fact there are only 3 voting members present, if there's any indication that not everyone is in agreement with respect to a decision, I will request a continuance But to answer your question, and by the way, we have no problem with an additional condition with respect to, I believe, the sewer connection. As I think we discussed at the last meeting, we need a sewer connection permit, and that would be typically done in connection with that. But if that's something that the board wishes to add, that's not an issue. With respect to the our surety, we proposed a performance bond of $500,000 in lieu of a covenant, and so I suggested that we specify that within the decision, and then delete condition number 8, which relates to a covenant, since we've satisfied our requirements under the Subdivision Act to provide a surety. With respect to the
And can I just ask how you arrived at the 500,000? I mean, I was going to ask about the performance bond, but how did you arrive at that number?
I believe it was a construction estimate from Mr. DeNuno. I'll ask him. I'm trying to contact him via text. Apparently his microphone is not working on that.
I switched over, Adam.
Oh, thank you.
Good evening. That is an estimate from Tony Ioria.
All right.
Could you describe who that person might be?
He is a site contractor that does a lot of the town's work as well as all of my work.
Thank you.
So Chair Callahan, there was
I'm just trying to think out loud how we verify that number or feel comfortable with that number. I don't know if Jim Reardon, if you're still out there, is that in your firm's expertise, or is that something our DPW and building inspector in some combination would have? I just want to make sure it's the right number, that's all. Not questioning Mr. Iaria's experience, but you know, we have to protect ourselves too. The other thing is the condition, I think it was in there, about potential future damage to the culvert.
I was just getting to Chair Callahan. Mr. DeNuno actually consulted with the DPW because one of the neighbors expressed concern about the condition of the culvert.
Yeah.
The report back was that there's nothing wrong with the
No,
culvert.
it was apparently redone, and Mr. Joyce, our DPW, had said he thinks it was right before COVID, so he's estimating 2019. It's fine now, but the question is in the future.
Yes, sir. And so
it's a critical piece of infrastructure, and if it's, and again, I think the condition was written in such a way is that, you know, it would certainly have to be demonstrated that it's additional traffic loads or construction vehicles from this project that are doing the damage. Obviously, it could fail just of its own accord from age, but
and that's the modification I proposed, which is that the applicant would have liability for any damage that it caused to the culvert. But if that damage was caused by others, it's not the applicant's
Yeah.
responsibility. As drafted, the applicant was something of a guarantor of the condition of the culvert. So that was one of our suggestions. And then I just want to remind the board that in lieu of a homeowners association, we proposed actual cross easements for all of the lots whereby the lot owners would be responsible for maintenance of the subdivision road as well as the stormwater BMPs. So I think a more direct.
why don't you draft?
Could you explain why you're making that recommendation? I mean, you're basically creating a situation in which no one would necessarily have any interest in putting money away to maintain the infrastructure that they have responsibility for. A homeowners association is designed to ensure, if they can, that there are resources so that if there are reasons that something needs to be managed or fixed, that there's resources for it. And in Massachusetts law pretty clear.
So homeowners associations are often used for larger developments where you have so many property owners, it makes sense to have all of the additional, I was going to use the word infrastructure, but perhaps bureaucracy is the better way of doing it. Again, this is 3 additional lots plus Mr. DeNuno's home. So the more cost-effective way of doing this is legally obligating the property owners to maintain those structures. It's only a handful of property owners, each of which will be responsible, and they will work out how they're going to do it in the future.
And what about the other owners using the road?
We're not asking the other owners to be responsible for maintenance. It's only going to be the lots that are subject to this subdivision.
The people coming into the subdivision are gonna need to know that, because we, you know, in our decision, we can't compel the other 4 or 5 lot owners to be part of this, but,
I mean, again.
I would say, I would suggest that you put together your proposed easement and let Carolyn review it, and she can report back to us on what is the better alternative.
So what's typically done is that's a condition, and as it's written is that we would provide the easement documents to town council for review and approval. It's usually done at the time of conveyancing. We don't usually do it. At the
All right,
permitting
well,
stage.
based on Amy's question, you can, I think there's concern of the board in understanding the difference. I understand the difference, but I'm not sure everybody understands the difference. So I don't know if you even have a draft of something you've done before, or, you know, something on a form on your computer, so at least people on the board can understand what it is they're looking at outside the normal or traditional homes or something. It's something you put together. I will tell you this, if we're gonna go forward, is I don't think the board has reached a consensus on all the points.
Thank you.
I think we, and they will correct me immediately if I say otherwise. I think we're in a position that we're going to grant a subdivision permit, but what waivers we're going to give and what mitigation we're going to be looking for is still not settled. And you and Carolyn will have some more discussions about that. I don't know, I don't think I'm speaking out of school that $15,000 is not going to do it.
So if I can speak to that.
And it's based on some calculation that I'm familiar with that bylaw in Hanover, but I think it's an outmoded calculation, because I will tell you that our head of DPW has told us for a sidewalk on the public portion of the road, it's $220 a linear foot, not 11. Prices have gone up apparently quite a bit. Now, that's a Cadillac sidewalk, but it's certainly far more than $11 a linear foot. So the board itself, though, has not settled on what it thinks is an appropriate number or appropriate form that the mitigation should take. We are going to look for a form of mitigation and appreciate that you've been forthright in offering that. But, you know, we're not at the point yet of settling on a number. So you're probably continuing this, and we'll bring Deirdre into the conversation as well. And you and Carolyn are certainly free to have further discussion about this.
Thank you, and we will request a continuous. I would like any precedent of the town in charging a fee for waiver of sidewalks, because I'm not aware of the town doing it in the past.
It was always a first time for everything.
I understand.
You're also, I mean, in we you know, other subdivisions that we've discussed amongst ourselves too earlier tonight, is these were subdivisions creating totally new roads coming off an existing public way. Different animal, I think, than something being built off the end of a pre-existing dead-end road. Because we can't compel you to do all the improvements all the way out to Summer Street that we would normally have. Normally, we would have a subdivision road with a sidewalk built the whole way from Summer Street as far back as your road goes. That's not feasible here. So we have to think outside the box and think of this as a unique piece of property that doesn't really have precedent elsewhere in the town.
And I appreciate that. I just remind the board that the applicant was originally seeking a common driveway, which would have no requirement for a sidewalk. And we're here in front of you in the spirit of cooperation to try and resolve that difference. I did go back.
We're fully aware of that, but what we're concerned at, based on the discussions with our own DPW head, that $11 a linear foot is an unrealistic number.
So all I can tell you is,
I think the number, if I'm correct, is baked into the Hanover bylaw and how the Hanover boards deal with it is beyond me, but
No, the ability to charge a fee is baked into the bylaw. The fee is not. I reached out to McKenzie Engineering, who does most of the work in Hanover. That was the last project I worked with them. And the numbers I got from them on their last 2 residential subdivisions, and these are large subdivisions, 20, 30 lots, were in the range of $11 to $13 a linear feet. So I don't know what the variance is with the
no,
DPW.
I get it, I know, and.
That's
and
fine.
Attorney
Were those,
Attorney Murray's come up with examples that projects that her firm's worked on, that it's, you know, another number entirely, and it's not $11 a linear foot either.
if you could get ADA compliant, $11 a linear foot for a sidewalk? And all other compliance, boy, I'd love to see that. I don't
So
think
I'm not sure the mitigation is supposed to directly relate to whatever the cost of the town is under prevailing wage to build an ADA compliant sidewalk.
Yeah,
It's some fee to justify the waiver.
well, people could take issue with different sides on that.
well, I'm,
And the town doesn't have a sidewalk fund anyway, so I don't know even how it's going to use these monies. But
well,
We do have a sidewalk fund.
no, not yet, we will.
Well, we put money in for Avalon as an example. That was,
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason we can't set up a fund for a particular project, but the town is moving in the direction of proposing at least a sidewalk and roadway fund. That may or may, you know, that's gonna be the subject of town meeting in 2 weeks. Anyway, I'm just pointing this out that, you know, the board has not reached a consensus on what appropriate mitigation is here. We are at a consensus that what is offered is not acceptable, and again, we have to think about that more, and you're free to have as much discussion with Attorney Murray as you wish to, because she's privy to what our thinking was on that, so.
Could you throw out a number of what you're
No, I'm
thinking?
not gonna throw out a number. I'm not negotiating against ourselves here.
I want to just make a point of
Well,
Well,
clarification.
I told you what our, you know, our
point-
DPW head said would be a Cadillac sidewalk for the length of the public portion of Black Horse Lane. Be $220 a linear foot. I think it came out to $220,000 because I think it's 100 feet, but that's the, like I said, that's the Cadillac sidewalk.
That's what I'm saying. That number's not happening. So if we're gonna continue down this path, we need some sense of where you're gonna land on a number.
Again,
Is it-
unfortunately, in the course of our executive session,
I-
we
fair.
can't come up with a consensus on how to
Well-
approach this.
We're getting pretty close to a full-on subdivision here, so I don't understand. We've made
These
compromises and we're asking for very few waivers now. You know, we can't keep going on like this forever.
are not suggesting that you will go on forever, but we only got to discuss your proposal as a group tonight, and we can't deliberate about it from the day you got it, so it was from the day you sent it to Carolyn, so we, you know, I'm just saying we're not there yet, and if you want 4 of us to participate in that decision, we will do 4 of us, but I'm not suggesting we put this off forever either. But I think that, again, people on the board can shoot me if they want and jump up and say something, but I think we are going to approve a subdivision in some form. It's just, and I think we differ on some of the waivers, but not all of them, and we're not in a consensus yet on a mitigation number. I think that's Carolyn, is that a fair statement of where we are?
I think that's accurate, Mr. Chair.
Chair Callahan, when can we next get on your agenda, please?
Sandra?
So your next 2 meetings, the first one is the 15th. The one following that is the 6th.
Chair Callahan, can we be placed on the agenda for November 15th? And in the interim, I will reach out to town council and see if we can't narrow the issues for discussion.
Well, I don't know, we have a full agenda that night. My concern is if this requires any length of discussion, it may take longer than that. then we have time for. We have, I don't know,
Yes, sir.
four
My sense is-
applications that night. What do we have? Four things and two new public hearings? I guess one in the village, or two in the village?
I believe, and I don't have it in front of me, I believe you have one large home review and two special permit site plan reviews.
Yeah, we have two new village permits, which take up some time, but, I mean, it's not impossible, but, what I would suggest for Carolyn is that with the caveat that you add what conditions Jim suggests, that we circulate to the board a draft of a decision. To remind the board that we cannot deliberate about that, so you just read it on your own, and when we get together, we'll discuss it. You can one-on-one it with Carolyn if you'd like, but if anybody, because right now, nobody has suggested any other conditions that I'm aware of other than myself. And my biggest concern was the culvert, and thank you for your, I'll look at your edit, Adam, but I don't have a problem with it. But, if we're ready to go on the 15th, we can certainly make it happen.
Mr. Chair, if I could just interject, it sounds like I'm going to have some further conversation with Attorney Brodsky, and then I'm going to have to bring that back to the board for another executive session. And if we want to try to move this along, it looks like we need an executive session on your meeting on November 15th. I don't know if the board wants to then consider, sounds like you have a full agenda that evening. Our executive session took us a little bit longer tonight than I think we had planned on. Would the board consider a meeting? I guess the following week is actually Thanksgiving week.
I'm gonna, I mean, as far as our agenda goes, I don't think that either, certainly, one, if I understand, one of the village permits is really a modification of an existing project that's already there, correct? The one on Pleasant Street? Okay. The other one is a new application, and a member of another board has already flagged some concerns about that. So, I mean, there's no problem with us limiting those to a half hour each, with the understanding we're not going to finish them. A large home review, I would think, isn't going to take too long, but let's plan on an executive session at 6. And the issue, I think, based on our discussions tonight, is going to be fairly straightforward for the board to decide. I think, again, if I'm not speaking out of school, it's the issue of mitigation and what form it will take, and then the issue of waivers relating to the width of the roadway and the sidewalk. I don't see any other giant issues that anybody has raised that are jumping out at us. And Kevin and Amy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if there's any other issues that either one of you have. But I think those are the ones we have to decide on, and I would like to think that with you, Adam and Caroline, having further discussion, we can be ready to make those decisions on the 15th in our executive session.
And then
I just wanted to say a point of order, which just is the typical amount of a performance bond ranges between 1% and 4%, and it depends on the nature of the project.
Yeah, again, Jim, is that something you got your hand up, I see.
Pretty hard
Thanks,
to
Chair
estimate.
Callahan. Yeah, so we could certainly take a look at those numbers, provided that we get a calculations to back them up. The reason that I raised my hand is that if there are to be new designs to be reviewed between now and the 15th, that might present some problem for us calendar wise.
Yeah,
We know that we need to get them to you a week ahead.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm not sure that would be the issue. necessarily.
Yeah,
But,
Chair Callahan, I don't think that there's going to be any willingness to change designs at this point. I think we're down to brass tacks and having
Yeah,
a business
I-
negotiation.
Yeah, and
Because
I don't think you know, however the width of the roadway comes out, creates a major design, you know, redesign thing that would have to be done.
it would, Chair Callahan, a major redesign, and I don't think the client is willing to do that. I don't want to
Okay.
speak for him, but you'd have to
Alright.
redesign all of the stormwater management as
Alright.
Ms. Hudson said, and there's an
All right,
unwillingness to do that.
Understood.
You're correct.
Can Mr. Iaria's, you know, calculations regarding the performance bond be gotten to Jim this
Uh,
week?
We'll do that. I mean, again, I'll defer to town council. Often the question of the amount of the bond is dealt with after the subdivision approval upon consultation with the DPW. We're trying to front load this because we wanted to be as specific as possible. But I don't see any reason why we can't get Mr. Iaria's proposal.
Why don't we just do that just so the board feels comfortable with it? I'm not, again, Mr. Iaria is very experienced. I'm not questioning that the figures are right or wrong, but I think we owe it to the public to make sure that they're good figures. I'm sure they are. All right. Does everybody understand what we're doing between now and the 15th?
So, Mr. Chair, I understand we're obviously going to have an executive session at the start of the meeting on the 15th. Are
Yes,
we also then continuing the discussion of the subdivision later in the evening on the 15th?
correct,
Okay. Thank you.
correct. And then we will, again, circulate what you've drafted thus far. Make sure Jim's comments, recommendations on conditions are incorporated. And hopefully we'll be ready to go with something. And then again, to Amy and Kevin, if there's an issue beyond those two that I mentioned, the issue of mitigation and the issue of waivers regarding the roadway and sidewalks, bring them up sooner rather than later. So that we can keep our discussion focused on what we need to decide. All right, so I'll make a motion to continue this hearing to Wednesday, November 15th at 6:30. Somebody second, please.
Second.
All in favor? Tom Callahan, aye.
Clark Brewer, I'm gonna abstain.
Amy Glassmar, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
And Sandra, if you could just remind Deirdre to look at the tapes of both the executive session and this session, and we'll get her up to speed.
So the executive sessions are not recorded.
Oh, all right, well, we'll,
I do have a note to get her Millen-Informed done.
okay, good.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Good night.
All right.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, do we have any other minutes or other business we need to discuss? I'll just
Do we have
update.
any role on the floor of town meeting aside from the
My plan, so,
zoning articles?
yeah, so just to bring you up to date, we have officially been moved to the last two articles on the warrant. I hope the quorum holds that we can get them done. If not, that might bring us into Tuesday night, but the advisory committee, I forget, there were either 8 or 9 of them there the other night. They approved both articles unanimously. Went through it with them by just showing them the summaries that have been created. That's what we're going to do. I'm going to make a brief introduction. I'm just going to say that the planning board has approved these, defer to the judge. She'll do the presentations of the summaries themselves, and that should be it. I don't expect as a board, other than me saying we endorse these, that we're going to need to do anything about it. It's going to be at the end of the night. That's going to have a lot of debate about the other articles, so trying to make it as short and sweet as possible. We are going to, I have to finalize it, but we are also going to put out a flyer with a poll about potential future changes to the accessory dwelling bylaw beyond what is being proposed for this town meeting. So that was something we agreed to do with the zoning board. And that's that. And again, reminder that next Wednesday on the 8th, the bylaw committee is hosting a meeting with its consultant on the housing choice legislation, and they're going to present their sketch of where the potential overlay district could lie. So I think everybody on this board, if you have the opportunity, should chime into that meeting and watch it.
When's that, Tom?
That's going to be next Wednesday. That's going to be also at 6:30, correct, Cassandra? Yeah. So that's the bylaw committee's meeting, but I'm invite everybody on this board should try to come and watch it if they can. It's going to be by Zoom. But we're losing the consultant's contract is up, so this was the last opportunity for them to present, the actual areas where an overlay district could go based on the marching orders we have given them over the time. So everybody, and again, the target for actually implementing the housing choice legislation is Springtown meetings. All right, do we have any minutes? Nope. Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
All right, if anybody doesn't have anything else, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Mark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
You Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
All right, great. Thank you all. Thank you, Cassandra,
Thanks, everyone.
Mark, and Carolyn.
Good night.
All right, good night.